Ow!
Yes, handling objections of all kinds is something a man has to learn early in life, and something a salesman, especially an automobile salesman, is faced with again and again. How to get a customer with no on his mind to say yes is a tough problem, mainly because customers seem to be thinking up new things to say no to as fast as you come up with the answers. It used to be that customer objections fell in certain categories that looked something like this, and included such stalwart phrases as, "I'll have to talk to my wife before I buy," and "I'm going to look around some more." But most salesmen found ways of combating these objections, some of which we'll see later. They overcame these objections only to find the price objection had become his number one problem. Yes, price is one of the most important single objections salesmen are faced with.
The biggest trouble with selling a car in our dealership is price. We don't seem to have any problem sorting the prospects out. In fact, we have a better than average floor traffic. But it seems like once we get the prospect in an automobile buying mood, well, then they begin the shopping parade, and we're dealing with a price buyer again.
We're dealing with a price buyer again. That's the standard complaint these days. But why? Here's one salesman's answer.
Well, one of the most important objections is price and the way that the customer is handled at the various dealerships. One of the biggest objections we find today, I say price not from a standpoint of the price that we're asking for this product we have to sell, but the way that this price has been kicked around the prospective buyer. In other words, let's call it bushing, highballing, so forth. People are fairly confused when they go out to buy an automobile. Let's say that they got themselves set to a specific car they want to purchase, and from there on, everybody starts to shoot them a figure. And no doubt there's probably a trade-in involved, there always is, and that these figures vary from, say, $250 to $300 a specific unit.
That's using the highball tactic?
Yeah, that's right. And we find there's an awful lot of objections to that right now.
Yes, if you think you are confused by the sudden trend to price shopping, remember how confused most customers are. And maybe you'll agree with this salesman who lays the blame on so-called highballing tactics.
That's why people have no confidence in this business. They don't know what they're doing. Well, what I mean is the average person doesn't know what the car costs or anything else. We made shoppers out of the people by these very tactics. I mean, giving the customer a price that you know you can't deliver the car at. But you also know that if he shops 10 other places, they'll all be higher than your figure. So then he'll come back to you. So then you sit down and you end up with the same figure that he's gotten at all those other places, and nobody's happy.
And nobody's happy. True enough, on a low gross deal like that, the salesman gets a small commission slice, and the customer is still liable to think he paid too much for the car, no matter what kind of a deal you gave him. But let's break this problem of price down. Let's see how top salesmen across the country are handling price problems in general, and how they get around a customer's highball. First, in general, says this West Coast salesman,
The minute they get on price, get them off price. Change the subject. Begin talking about something else. Their kids, their wife, their home, something else. Get them off from that price kick and get back to your product story.
Then from the Midwest, another salesman who agrees about changing the subject.
Get that customer to say yes, yes, yes. And the quickest way to say yes is to talk about something they enjoy, something they're familiar with, the family, the kids, the house. And get them in a frame of mind again where you're doing the selling instead of the customer, rather than the customer trying to sell you on a certain price figure.
Change the subject and sell the product, so you get the customer in the frame of mind where you are doing the selling again. In other words, you are controlling the sale. Fair enough? But what does it get you? Here's one answer from a salesman in Milwaukee.
So the salesman
has to make the customer like him, make him trust him. Many times the salesman forgets about a product presentation because the guy has already shopped the Ford. He assumes that the fellow knows all about the Ford. But if he spends the time with that customer, demonstrates the car, gives the customer a product presentation. So all things being equal, who's that customer going to come back to?
This, too, seems to make sense. Spend time with the price shopper so that when he's tired of shopping, he remembers you and comes back to you to buy. But to sum up, let's listen to this comment from a top sales manager.
Number one, sell yourself. Sell yourself. Secondly, sell your product. Thirdly, sell your dealership. And then the price will become a secondary problem.
And how's this worked out for you?
Well, it's been very successful. We are not the highest volume Ford dealer in this town, but I think that we are among the very top in profit.
These ideas may work perfectly well for this sales manager and this dealership, but many salesmen find they are not enough. They ask, what do you do after you've tried all this? And the customer still objects to the price. Okay, from another part of the country, here's another salesman's answer, based on a cards-on-the-table approach.
The way we approach it is this idea of making them want to do business with you first, which is a starter. Talking in terms of this taking control of the deal. Well, we think in terms of selling profit. Now, some of these things are very common sense. Man knows you're making a profit on the car. Public knows it. And people don't stay in business without a profit. For instance, well, my approach is, Mr. Brown, first of all, we can make a close deal. And as I said earlier, the overhead here, well, we've got the lowest overhead of any dealer around here. And we can afford to sell these cars at a good price. We can give you a good deal. How much profit do you think we've got in a car? You say $800, $900, $1,000? Something fantastic? If we could handle a car for you for $300, we could get together, couldn't we? Well, then you start actually sitting down and talking with a man and selling him on the profit that you're going to retain rather than how much you're going to give him in closing the deal. You occasionally hit this. The guy will say, well, I don't care if you don't make any profit. I'm only interested in how good a deal I can get. I don't care whether it's a Ford or a Chevy or a Plymouth. I want to see how cheap I can trade. Well, you can break those boys down fast by just talking to them. Talk his language right to him. And he'll laugh, and he'll know that's right. Now, I'm going to make something on this car, and if you don't want me to make it on a car, I'm wasting your time and my time. And I want to sell you. And I believe you want to buy from me. Then you talk to them a little bit. People expect you to make a profit on it, particularly if you nail a shopper on the head. A man hasn't shopped anywhere when we get him first, we can close him.
Most salesmen would agree with that last statement at least. But where do you find customers who haven't shopped, or at least claim they've shopped? These days it seems you don't. In fact, many a salesman, thinking he's wrapped up a deal, has the deposit, and has already figured where he's going to spend the commission money, runs into the customer highball. Just listen.
I beat your deal $100. Can you meet this other deal? And I've given you a deposit, but you know, if I demand, I can get my deposit back, and I feel that you ought to be able to give me as good a deal as anybody. I come to you first, and here in the meantime, this other man contacted me, and right away he gives me a $100 better deal. Well, you can't say now right away I'm going to meet that other man's deal.
You'd better not say that, or out the window goes your profit. But how do you handle it? One way is to do what this salesman suggests. Simply say,
well, now I'll go to the boss and see what we can do here. I know a lot of these other salesmen, when they run into someone that has made a sale, they'll quite often give you a highball figure that they say, well, I could have beat that deal $100, but just the salesman telling you that doesn't mean that he can do it. He can try. I could have wrote this up $100 better deal too, but I couldn't have went to the boss and got it through. But I'll go to the boss, and if there's anything that isn't right about this, we'll sure better it. I mean, I want you satisfied, too. I mean, I've appreciated your business, and I'll do everything I can to hold your business, but I'm not going to do something that I tell you something that I can't do.
This, of course, is only one way to handle the problem of the customer highball. There are others, some good, others not so good. The following taped interviews include some of the most effective answers salesmen around the country have found. Let's start off on the reverse side of the record with this one from a salesman in the Southwest.
Well, customers highball, there are many ways of overcoming it. One of the ways I used quite often was explain to the customer that actually he was on a highball, just explain exactly what a highball is. And then go in and ask him a few questions of whether it was actually a salesman's quotation, or was it a bona fide quote from the sales manager or the general manager or the dealer himself. And then, of course, explain to them what the possibilities are when they go back. And lots of times I had to turn them loose, but I had them so prepared when they went back to that competitor of mine, they just started off doing exactly what I explained to the customer would happen, and that blew them right out the tub and right back to old Doug.
A similar technique is used by this salesman.
So when a man comes to us, we try to establish this figure, a figure that we can really deal on, and not a figure that we're going to feel that we're going to have to highball a man when he comes back in.
So, well, what if he's been shopping
Well,
already?
he's been shopping. Well, he's shopped, and first thing he does when we give him our figure, he jumps up off the chair and he says, "You guys are nuts," or something like that with this figure. So we tell him to sit back down, and we go through this thing and try and explain it to him, what's going to happen to him. For one thing, when he gets back in, it's nothing but a come on, and it's going to be a high ball, sure as hell, when you know that our figure is a couple $100 off. Let's say it'd be $200 off. I know it's going to be a high ball. So you tell the guy, invariably that same fellow will wander back in.
In fact, it's best not to let him get out the door at all. Says this sales manager,
I don't like the highball. I don't like it. By the same token, I don't want to give a salesman a minimum deal. I mean, my minimum figure that I'll deal at right away, because the customer can use that to shop with.
No.
I don't want them to give them a price unless they know that the customer is ready to buy.
Sure.
So the way I teach the salesman to do it is they get the customer, however they get him. I don't know, I mean, whether he's a walk-in or whether he's somebody they have made an appointment with over the telephone, or whether he's a referral or whatever he is, to first talk to the man in relation to what his car is worth. Now, I believe that every customer, when he's ready to buy a car, knows what his car is worth. He's reading the paper. He's looking in the classified to see what the hell can I get for my car.
He isn't a babe in the woods
No,
when he comes
he's
in
not.
to see you.
That's right. So then I believe in having the salesman shock him. Give him a low figure on what his car is worth, or a minimum figure, not too ridiculous, and then use the list price of our car and quoting that difference. Let him come down off of the ceiling. In other words, let him be shocked, and then that customer will come back with a figure that is in the back of his mind. He may lie a little bit, but you're more apt to get a commitment out of the customer as to what he will deal at. Then, whether the salesman knows or doesn't know whether he can get the deal through, that's beside the point. Write the deal immediately, get a deposit, then work from there.
Up New England way, this salesman uses the service department technique.
Always. We ride that service thing more than anything. Man, now, sure, we can sell you this car cheap. Nothing. We won't touch it. Well, where shouldn't you drive it out the door? Would you be satisfied with that? No. I want it serviced. Well, in order to pay for good mechanics, we have to make a little money. And anybody with a little common sense will go along with the idea. It's always worth $50, sometimes $100 or $150 more on a deal.
Giving him a reason to buy from you is sound salesmanship. If you give him enough good reasons, if you can keep him thinking and talking, he isn't buying from competition. And sooner or later, he may buy from you. But to sum up, listen to this comment on handling the highball.
Well, naturally, when we get a person that comes in a highball, we try to sell him a car and try to get him off the subject. Keep getting into different things. Get him off on the subject of that particular unit. And get him where he's more interested in buying a car or certain features of that car than he is with a highball. In other words, you snowball the highball. Get rid of it.
Snowball the highball. One way to do this is to ask the kind of questions this salesman asks of customers who claim they can get a better deal.
Could there be a misunderstanding? We've had answers of yes to that one. Are you sure you're talking about the right engine? Did you ask him if you were getting V8? Are you getting this and this and this equipment? And a lot of times they'll back off from, these are methods that they turn around and deal with us. Could the salesman made an error? That gets the man to thinking. And did the sales manager prove it? Oh, yes, sir. Who was he? In Richmond, there's only 4. Who'd you talk to, Mr. Rice? No, I didn't talk to Mr. Rice. Well, Mr. Rice is the only man who can prove that deal. And you'll be surprised how that ferrets things out. In other words, these are all misunderstandings.
Yes, there are lots of answers and lots of different ways of handling customer objections. Ways like changing the subject, selling the product, selling yourself and the dealership, explaining the highball to the customer, shocking him, and simply keeping him talking until you can close him. Not all of these answers will work all of the time, of course. You're going to run into objections you won't be able to overcome. But don't get discouraged. Be persistent. Keep trying. And you'll be surprised how many times you'll wind up making the sale.